You know, sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It waits, quiet, patient, like an old photograph at the bottom of a drawer, yellowed and forgotten. And then one day, when you least expect it, it crawls right back into the light. That's what happened to me. It was the night of my daughter's engagement party. The house was full of laughter, her laughter mostly. That bright, contagious kind that used to make me forget everything wrong in my world. I remember standing near the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of little sandwiches, my hands shaking just a bit. I told myself it was excitement, but deep down it was fear. You see, I'd kept a secret for 30 years. A secret I prayed would die with me. But that night, my husband made sure it didn't. It started like any other celebration. The air smelled of baked chicken, rosemary, and the faint sweetness of vanilla candles. I could hear rain tapping softly on the windows, not a storm, just that gentle drizzle that makes you want to hold someone's hand. My daughter, Emily, looked radiant. She wore this pale blue dress that hugged her shoulders, the same color as the blanket I wrapped her in when she was born. My heart swelled just seeing her smile. Her fiancé, Mark, had his arm around her. A good man, steady job, kind eyes. He called me Ma from the moment he met me. I thought maybe, finally, life was giving me peace. But peace is such a fragile thing. My husband, Robert, had been quiet all evening. Too quiet. He wasn't a talkative man to begin with, but that night, there was something in the way he stared at his drink, like it was keeping a secret too. When the music softened and people gathered for toasts, he stood up. I didn't even notice at first. I was wiping my hands, trying to keep my nerves hidden behind a smile. Then I heard the clinking of his glass. "I want to say something," he said. Everyone turned toward him, and my heart dropped straight to the floor. You know that feeling when every sound fades, but your heartbeat gets louder? That's what it was like. I knew. I just knew. He started by saying how proud he was of Emily, how beautiful she looked, how happy he was that she'd found someone who loved her. His voice cracked a little, and for a second I thought he was about to cry. But then he looked at me, right at me, and there was this look in his eyes, a kind I'd seen only once before. The night I told him the truth, 3 decades ago. I still remember that night too. We'd just gotten married. Robert was good to me, patient, kind, though not much of a romantic. I'd come into the marriage with a heart already bruised. Before him, there was someone else. His name was Michael. He was, well, let's just say, the kind of man who makes you feel seen. The kind who says your name like a promise. We were young, foolish, in love. But life has its cruel ways. He left, or maybe I pushed him away, I don't know anymore. And not long after, I found out I was pregnant. With Emily. When I told Robert, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "We'll raise her as ours."
And he did.
He was a good father. Never once treated her differently. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at her, studying her face. Her eyes, her laugh. She didn't have his nose, or his chin, or his quiet temperament. She had Michael's fire. I prayed he'd forget. I prayed time would bury it. But time, my dear, doesn't bury the truth. It just tucks it under a thin sheet of silence. And silence doesn't last forever. At the engagement party, he cleared his throat. The guests, maybe 50 of them, turned their attention to him. The room was glowing with candlelight, and I swear the air felt heavier with every word he said. "Before we celebrate this new chapter," he began, "there's something that's been buried too long." I froze. Every instinct in me screamed to stop him. But I couldn't move. It was like my body had turned to stone. I heard someone whisper, "What's he talking about?" Then came the thunder. Soft at first, just a grumble outside, but inside, it felt like the heavens were opening. He looked at me one last time, and his voice, God, it was trembling. "Emily," he said, "I love you more than anything. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter."
But
the word "but" sliced through me like a knife. He took a deep breath. "There's something your mother never told you." I can still feel the room spinning. The clinking glasses stopped. Someone's phone buzzed, then silence again. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my nails digging into the wood, as my heart begged him not to go on. Please, Robert, don't. But he did. He told her that 30 years ago, I was in love with another man. That she wasn't his by blood. That he had carried that truth alone, for decades, to protect her and me. Every word fell like thunder. And every breath I took hurt. Emily's face went pale. I saw her lips move, but no sound came out. Her fiancé looked at her, then at me. Guests were whispering, gasping, staring. Someone dropped a glass. The sound shattered the silence, and so did my world. Robert sat down slowly after that.
Didn't look at me.
Didn't look at anyone. And I couldn't speak. How do you explain 30 years of fear in one sentence? How do you defend a lie that began with love? That night, I watched everything I'd built crumble in front of my eyes. Not because of anger, not because of betrayal, but because of truth, too heavy, too late. And I realized something. Secrets don't die in silence. They rot. They grow in the dark until they find a way out, usually when your heart is most unprepared. I spent years convincing myself it was for the best, that she didn't need to know, that happiness could be built on partial truths. But as I stood there, staring at my daughter's tear-streaked face, I knew love built on lies will always break under truth's weight. After everyone left, the house smelled of rain and cold chicken. The candles had melted down to stubs. Robert slept in the guest room. Emily wouldn't answer my calls. I sat on the couch, holding her baby photo. The one where she's laughing, toothless, her little hand reaching toward the camera. My tears fell on that picture, darkening the paper. I whispered to it, "I'm sorry," over and over. I used to think heartbreak was for the young, for lovers and dreamers. But that night, I learned something different. Heartbreak can find you even after the wrinkles set in. It can sit beside you at a quiet table, whispering all the what-ifs you never answered. And sometimes it wears the face of your own child. If you've ever felt a heartbreak like this, please hit the like button. I just need to know I'm not the only one. Memory's a funny thing. It doesn't come back in straight lines. It comes in smells, in laughter, in the sound of a screen door slamming shut on a summer night. That's how it all began for me. Before the secrets, before the heartbreak, there was just life. Messy, loud, ordinary life. I was 23 when I met Robert. It was at the county fair. The air smelled like popcorn and dust, and the sun had burned everything golden. He was running the ring toss booth, trying too hard to look serious. I remember laughing when he missed his own throw. He looked up, smiled that small, crooked smile, and for a moment, I forgot the man I was still crying over. That man was Michael. He was supposed to come back for me that summer. But he didn't. So when Robert asked if he could walk me home, I said yes. Maybe out of loneliness. Maybe because I was tired of waiting. He carried my purse for me, even though it weighed almost nothing. That's how Robert was. Quiet, steady, dependable. He wasn't lightning. He was shelter. We married 6 months later. Our first home was barely a home. 1 bedroom, a leaking faucet, and a stove that groaned every time you turned the knob. But we made it ours. I can still see the faded curtains I sewed from old bedsheets. I can still smell the coffee that burned every morning because I was always distracted, dreaming of what life might become. Robert worked long hours at the factory. I got a job at the library, sorting returns and reading half the books instead of shelving them. We didn't have much, but we had each other, or so I thought. At night, he'd fall asleep before I could say goodnight. His breathing steady, mine restless. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the cracked window, I'd whisper Michael's name, so quietly that even I could barely hear it. I told myself it was just habit, just a leftover ache. Then, a few weeks later, I felt the first flutter in my belly. Emily. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to be happy. I truly did. But joy doesn't erase fear. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, holding the little test in my trembling hands, the smell of soap and rust filling the air. Robert knocked on the door. "Everything all right, honey?" I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded far away. That night, I told him. He froze. The clock ticked louder than our breaths. Finally, he said, "We'll raise her as ours." No anger. No shouting. Just quiet acceptance that broke me more than any rage could have. He hugged me then. His hands were rough, calloused from the factory. I remember pressing my face into his chest and smelling sawdust and sweat. He kissed the top of my head. And for the first time in weeks, I cried. The months that followed were gentle. The town softened around us. Neighbors brought casseroles, and my belly grew round like a summer moon. Robert read parenting books he borrowed from the library. He'd fall asleep mid-page, glasses slipping down his nose, and I'd giggle quietly. When Emily was born, it rained. A warm rain, the kind that smells like wet earth and lilacs. I'll never forget the first time I held her. She had a head full of dark hair and the tiniest hands I'd ever seen. Her fingers curled around mine as if to say, "Don't worry, Mama. I'm here." Robert cried when he saw her. He thought I didn't notice, but I did. His tears fell fast, quiet into the blanket. He whispered, "She's perfect." And she was. For a while, life was perfect too. We had our routines. Every morning, Robert would lift Emily into the air and make airplane noises. She'd giggle until she hiccuped. I'd stand by the stove flipping pancakes, pretending not to cry from happiness. On weekends, we'd drive to the lake. Robert would fish, I'd read, and Emily would chase dragonflies, her laughter floating over the water. Those were the golden years, the kind that make you believe you've outrun your past. But the past isn't something you can outrun. It walks beside you, quiet, patient, waiting for a weak moment. Mine came one spring afternoon, 5 years after Emily was born. I was walking home from the market. The sun was high. The breeze smelled of oranges from the fruit stand. That's when I saw him. Michael. He was standing by the old post office, hands in his pockets, that same crooked grin that once made me forget to breathe. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. The world went muffled, like I'd stepped underwater. He said my name, Anna.
Just like that. Soft.
Familiar. Dangerous. I froze. The bag of apples I was holding slipped, rolling down the sidewalk. We stood there for a long time, two ghosts from another life. He told me he'd been traveling, that he'd made mistakes, that he never stopped thinking about me. I remember staring at the scar near his chin. He'd gotten it fixing his old truck. The sight of it broke something open inside me. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to walk away. But I couldn't. We met again by accident, I told myself. The park, the corner cafe, then once more near the church. Always just to talk. But talking turned to remembering, and remembering turned to what it always does. I hated myself for it. Every time I looked at Robert, I saw kindness I didn't deserve. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw the truth I couldn't speak. One evening, after supper, Robert reached across the table and touched my hand. His palm was warm, steady. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded, believing me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, guilt pressing on my chest like a weight. Beside me, he snored softly, and I whispered to the dark, "Forgive me." A month later, Michael left again. He said he couldn't bear to hurt me anymore, couldn't stand the lies. I watched him drive off through the rain, his taillights fading like dying stars. I never saw him again. For a while, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the parts of me that could feel joy. Then, slowly, Robert filled the silence. He never asked questions, never demanded explanations, just stayed. He fixed the kitchen sink, painted the porch, sang to Emily when she was sick. And with every small act, he reminded me what love really looked like, not the kind that burns, but the kind that endures. I began to believe maybe that was enough. Years passed. Emily grew. She had Michael's eyes, sharp, bright, curious, but Robert's patience. Sometimes, when she'd run to him shouting, "Daddy," I'd feel a pang deep in my stomach. Not guilt, exactly. Just a reminder of what truth costs when it's buried. At night, when I brushed her hair, she'd ask about when I was young. Was Daddy your first love? She asked once, eyes wide innocent. I smiled and lied. Yes, sweetheart. He was. She grinned and said, then I want to find someone just like him. And my heart broke. Quietly, invisibly. There were happy years after that. Birthdays, school plays, first dances. Robert teaching her to drive, me teaching her how to make biscuits the way my mother did, cold butter, gentle hands. Sometimes, I'd catch Robert watching us with that same old softness in his eyes. And sometimes, I'd see the flicker, that shadow of the truth between us. It never left. It just rested beneath the surface, waiting. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily was 16. It was late, past midnight. The rain was coming down hard, drumming on the roof like 1,000 small fists. Robert was pacing the living room, his jaw tight. She should have been home hours ago, he muttered. I tried to calm him. It's just a party, she's fine. But even as I said it, I felt the same fear crawling through me. When the headlights finally flashed across the window, I exhaled in relief. Emily stumbled in, mascara smudged, eyes red. Robert went still. What happened? She shrugged, trying to sound casual. Nothing. But her voice cracked. He stepped closer. Did someone hurt you? She shook her head, tears spilling down.
No.
I found out something. My heart stopped. What do you mean? She looked at me, then at Robert. Someone at the party said, I don't look like you. Said maybe I was adopted or something. The room fell silent. I forced a laugh. Oh, sweetheart, people say all kinds of nonsense. Robert's eyes met mine, a flicker, quick and sharp. He put his arm around her. Ignore them, he said softly. You're ours. That's all that matters. She nodded, sniffled, and went upstairs. But after she closed her door, he turned to me. There was no anger in his face. Just exhaustion. It's getting harder to pretend, he whispered. I wanted to tell him the truth didn't matter anymore. That love was enough. But the words wouldn't come. We just stood there listening to the rain. And though neither of us said it, we both knew. The clock had started ticking. That night, something changed, though I didn't know it yet. After that night, after Emily's question and Robert's whisper, the air in our house changed. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it, like the weight before a storm. We went about our days pretending nothing had shifted, but every word, every look, carried an echo. Silence had a sound now. Emily laughed a little less. Robert smiled a little less. And me? I started sleeping with the light on. Maybe I thought it could keep the truth away a little longer. A few months later, Emily started spending more time with her friend's family. Said she liked the warmth of their house, the way everyone talked over each other at dinner. I didn't think much of it. Teenagers need space, I told myself. But one evening, she came home late, holding a folded piece of paper. Her hands were shaking. Mom, she said quietly, can we talk? I nodded, but something inside me screamed no. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd learned to write her name, where we'd shared birthday cakes and Sunday pancakes. Her voice trembled. Who is Michael? The world tilted. My throat closed up. I whispered, Where did you hear that name? She held up the paper. I found an old letter in the attic. It's from him.
To you.
It says he misses you and that he hopes our daughter has your smile. She swallowed hard. Mom, what does that mean? I couldn't breathe. I looked at her eyes, those eyes that had always reminded me of him, and for the first time, I saw confusion where love used to be. I tried to speak, but words felt heavy, clumsy. Sweetheart, that was a long time ago. You don't understand. Her voice rose, cracked. Then help me understand. I shook my head, tears blurring everything. It doesn't matter anymore. You're mine. You've always been mine. She stared at me, then whispered the words that broke me in half. And his? Robert walked in then. He must have heard. He froze at the doorway, eyes darting between us. Emily turned to him, desperate. Dad, tell me it's not true. Tell me she's wrong. Robert's lips parted, but nothing came out. That silence, that terrible, endless silence, was the answer. Emily stumbled back like she'd been hit. Her chair screeched across the floor. "You both lied to me?" Her voice shattered. I reached out for her hand. "Please, baby, I did it to protect you. To protect us." She pulled away. "Protect me from what?" "The truth." Her tears fell fast, angry. "All those years you looked me in the eyes, told me stories about how I was your miracle baby." I nodded, sobbing. "You were, Emily. You are."
She shook her head. "No, Mom.
I was your secret." Those words, I still hear them when the house is quiet. She ran upstairs, slammed her door. The sound echoed through me. Robert sat down at the table, covering his face. His shoulders trembled. I whispered, "I never wanted her to find out like that."
He didn't look at me.
"Then why keep it? Why not tell her when she was old enough to understand?" "Because I was afraid," I said softly. He laughed, bitter, broken. "Afraid of what?" "That she'd stop loving you." I didn't answer.
"Because yes."
That's exactly what I'd feared. The days that followed were hollow. Emily barely spoke. She stayed in her room, lights off, curtains drawn. When I'd knock, she'd say, "I'm fine," but her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. Robert and I spoke in whispers, the kind of whispers that never fix anything. One night, I found him sitting in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. He said quietly, "I thought we'd made peace with it. But you never really let it go, did you?" I looked at him, eyes swollen from crying. How could I? Every time I looked at her, I saw him. Robert exhaled, a shaky sound. "And every time I looked at her, I saw you. The part of you I could never reach." He stood up, walked to the window, and whispered, "I kept your secret all these years. I lied for you, but I never stopped wondering what else you hid." I wanted to tell him there was nothing else, that my heart had belonged to him for decades. But the truth? The truth was messier than love. A week later, Emily came downstairs with a suitcase. "I'm staying with Aunt Claire for a while," she said, her tone flat, eyes puffy. My chest tightened. "Please don't do this. We can talk." She cut me off. "You had 30 years to talk." Robert tried to stop her, voice trembling. "Emily, please." She looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "You're the only father I'll ever have. But right now, I don't know how to look at either of you." Then she walked out.
The door closed.
And with it a lifetime of pretending closed too. I didn't eat for days. Couldn't sleep either. The house was too quiet. Every creak, every drip of the faucet felt like a reminder of the words I should have said sooner. Robert stopped wearing his wedding ring. I found it once on the kitchen counter, next to his keys. I picked it up, pressed it against my heart, and cried until the morning light came through the blinds. I thought maybe, just maybe, time would soften the edges. But time, as I learned, doesn't heal what you never face. And then came the night that changed everything. Stay with me till the end. What I found next still keeps me awake at night. It was late. The rain was back. That same soft, endless drizzle that seemed to follow me through every turning point in my life. Robert hadn't come home yet. He'd been staying out later, saying he needed space. I didn't argue. Maybe I deserved his distance. But that night, I heard something, a faint noise from the garage. I thought maybe it was him, so I went to check. The air smelled like motor oil and damp wood. I called his name softly. "Robert." No answer. Then I saw it, his old workbench, the one he hadn't used in years. Papers scattered on top. A small wooden box. I shouldn't have opened it. God, I wish I hadn't. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to him. From Michael. My hands started shaking. I unfolded one. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were clear. "I know she loves you now. Take care of her. Take care of our little girl. She deserves a father like you." I sat down hard, the world spinning. There were more letters, each one more painful than the last. In one, Michael wrote about seeing Emily from afar when she was a toddler. about how he wanted to come forward, but Robert had begged him not to. Begged him. I couldn't believe it. Robert had written back. His replies were there too. In one, he said, "If you love her, let her live in peace. Let her grow up without confusion. You and I both know she's better off this way." I covered my mouth, tears soaking my hands. Robert knew more than he'd ever told me. When he came home later that night, I was still sitting there, surrounded by the letters. He froze when he saw me. "Anna," he whispered. My voice came out small, trembling. "How long have you been talking to him?" He closed his eyes. "Since before she was born." My chest burned. You knew he was alive?" He nodded. "He found me first. Wanted to tell you." I begged him not to. "I thought I was protecting you." Protecting her. I stood, clutching one of the letters. "You lied to me, Robert. You kept this from me all these years." His voice cracked. "You lied first." The words hit me like a slap. We stood there. Two people buried under decades of silence, neither one innocent, both too broken to fight. He whispered, "I did it because I loved you, even when it hurt." And for the first time, I believed him. The days that followed blurred together. Emily didn't call. Robert slept in the guest room again. I spent hours reading and rereading those letters, as if answers were hidden between the lines. Sometimes, I'd imagine Michael's voice, soft, forgiving, telling me it was all okay. But it wasn't. It never would be. I'd built my whole life on the hope that love could cover the truth. But truth doesn't disappear, no matter how much love you pile on top. It just waits, patient, sharp, and merciless. A few weeks later, I finally got a letter of my own. It was from Emily. Just one line. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm trying." I pressed that letter to my heart and cried for hours, not out of relief, but out of the ache that forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It just makes it survivable. Sometimes, late at night, I still walk past that old table, the one where Emily once asked me about my first love. The table where everything began and ended. I trace the scratches on its surface, the tiny stain from her first attempt at baking cookies. And I whisper to the air, to the ghosts that never left, "I'm sorry." Because even now, after all these years, I'm still that young woman holding too much love and too much fear at once. And maybe that's what betrayal really is. Not hatred, not cruelty, but the terrible choice between truth and love. I wish I could tell you I chose right, but I didn't. That night, I finally understood what Robert meant when he said love isn't lightning, it's shelter. But even shelter collapses when the storm lasts too long. And ours lasted 30 years. I didn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but my thoughts were louder than thunder. Every creak of the floorboard felt like his footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like his voice repeating those cruel words. My husband, the man I trusted more than anyone, had turned my past into a weapon. And in front of everyone I loved. Our daughter's laughter had turned into silence. My hands trembled when I touched the teacup that morning. The steam rose gently, but my heart was frozen solid. I stared at the tea leaves swirling inside the cup and whispered, "It's over." But then, I heard my mother's voice in my mind. "Child, when someone shames you, don't hide. Está taller. Speak truth in your own time." That whisper lit a spark. Not anger. Something quieter. Stronger. A decision. The next few days were slow, heavy, like walking through wet sand. I moved through the house quietly. He didn't speak to me. Just walked around like nothing had happened. The sound of his shoes on the floor felt like small hammers against my chest. But I stayed calm. I smiled when he looked at me. That same polite smile I used when he first courted me. He thought I was broken. He thought he'd silenced me. But inside I was planning. I began with the drawer under the old lamp. The one with the worn brass handle that squeaked when opened. Inside were 30 years of life, letters, receipts, memories. I took out the first paper, a hospital bill. My fingers brushed the corner, and I remembered the night I gave birth to my daughter. He wasn't there. He'd said he had work. But I knew where he'd been. I knew even then. And now I had proof. I kept pulling papers, old checks, messages he'd hidden, and one photograph that stopped my breath. It was him and another woman, smiling in front of a house I didn't recognize. I turned the photo around. The handwriting on the back said, "For our future." My hand trembled so much I dropped it, but then I smiled. Not from joy, but from clarity. I finally saw the full picture. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a kind man named Robert, who'd handled my parents' estate years ago. His voice was gentle. "Mrs. Evans, what's this about?" I told him everything, the years of silence, the humiliation, the hidden accounts I suspected. There was a long pause. Then he said, "You've been strong a long time. Let's make sure it means something." That sentence became my lifeline. For the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives. By day, I played the same quiet wife, making dinner, cleaning the porch, folding his shirts. He never noticed how carefully I looked through every drawer, every cabinet, every envelope. By night, I was awake under a small lamp, sorting evidence. My eyes burned, but my heart stayed sharp. I found bank statements under a false name. Transfers. Investments I never knew existed. He'd been hiding money, a lot of it, for years. My husband wasn't just cruel. He was deceitful. And now I had the truth in my hands. One evening, as I sat by the table with stacks of paper around me, my daughter walked in. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying again. "Mom," she whispered, "why didn't you tell me before?" I looked at her and felt a tear run down my cheek. "Because I wanted to protect you," I said softly. "But I forgot to protect myself." She knelt beside me, holding my hands, and for the first time since the engagement party, we cried together. No words, just the sound of two broken hearts finding each other again. When she stood, she said, "Do what you need to do, Mom. I'll stand with you." I nodded. My lips trembled, but my voice was steady. "It's time." The confrontation came quietly.
No shouting.
No drama. Just truth. He walked into the dining room, expecting dinner. I had the table set, his plate, fork, and knife perfectly aligned. But instead of food, there was a folder.
He frowned.
"What's this?" I looked at him, my voice calm. "Your lies. Your accounts. Your second life." He laughed nervously, but his hands twitched. "You're being dramatic." I slid one paper toward him, then another, and another. His face lost color. The sound of papers brushing the table was the only thing between us. "I know about her," I said softly. "And the money. And the years you thought I was blind." He stood up, voice rising. "You can't prove anything." I tilted my head slightly, meeting his eyes. I already did. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush years of deceit. He sat back down, shoulders sinking. "What do you want?" he muttered. I took a breath. "Freedom. And justice." I opened the folder to the final page, the divorce papers. My lawyer had prepared everything. "You'll sign this, and you'll transfer what's mine. What you stole from our family." His hands shook. "You can't do this." I smiled faintly. "I already am." For the first time in my life, I saw him small. Not the man I feared, not the man who controlled the story, just a man caught in his own web. He looked down, then whispered, "You'll regret this." I stood, slow and steady.
No.
I regret staying silent. I walked to the window. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then steady. It felt like the world was washing something away. He sat there, staring at the papers, the rain echoing in the quiet room. The next few days were a blur.
He left.
Tried to talk his way out, but the evidence was airtight. My lawyer moved fast. Accounts frozen. Properties listed. Everything was coming to light. I stayed calm through it all. Tea in the morning, soft music in the background, the smell of rain drifting through the curtains. My daughter visited often, holding my hand, smiling with quiet pride. I wasn't broken anymore. I was reborn. Then came the day of the settlement. I wore a simple blue dress, the same one I'd worn to our wedding rehearsal decades ago. As I entered the office, the floor felt solid under my feet. He was already there, older, grayer, eyes full of exhaustion. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. I was no longer the woman who needed his approval. The room smelled faintly of paper and coffee. The sound of pens scratching on documents filled the silence. When the final paper was signed, I closed my folder, stood up, and said, "You taught me how to be quiet. But you forgot. Silence isn't weakness." He didn't reply. He just looked away. That was enough for me. When I stepped outside, the sun was warm. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. My daughter was waiting near the car. She smiled and said, "It's done?" I nodded. "It's done." We stood there for a long moment, watching the wind ripple through the trees. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, the kind that comes from finally being free. That evening, I sat alone on the porch. The light was golden, the air soft. I held a small cup of tea, the steam curling in front of my face. My hands still trembled, but not from fear. From release. I whispered to the wind. 30 years of silence, ended in one truth. The world felt still, almost kind. Then, from somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice, my own, said, "You did it." I smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes from surviving what should have broken you. Don't blink now. What happened next changed everything. The morning after everything ended, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet again, not heavy, not haunted, just quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. I sat up slowly, the bedsheet cool against my legs, and for a moment, I listened to the faint chirping of birds outside. I'd forgotten how beautiful that sound was. For years, my mornings began with tension, waiting for the door to open, for his voice, for another day of pretending. But now, there was no pretending left.
Just me.
My breath. My own heartbeat. I made tea the same way I always did, 1 spoon of leaves, a bit of honey, no sugar. The kettle hissed and sighed, filling the kitchen with steam. My hands still trembled when I poured, but not from fear. From the strange feeling of freedom. I carried the cup to the porch and sat down, watching the light slowly stretch across the yard. The air smelled like rain and earth. I took a sip, closed my eyes, and whispered, "You're okay now." Sometimes healing doesn't arrive like a storm. It comes in small moments, the clink of a teacup, the creak of a chair, the sound of your own voice after years of silence. I learned that the hard way. The first few days alone were strange. I'd find myself setting 2 cups on the table out of habit. One for me, one for him. Then I'd stop, smile softly, and say, "No, just one." That simple motion, removing the second cup, became my quiet ritual of freedom. People in town began to whisper, of course. They always do. But instead of shame, I felt a kind of pride. Not the proud kind that comes from victory, the soft kind that grows from survival. My daughter called every evening. Sometimes we didn't even talk, just stayed on the phone together while I cooked. She said she felt closer to me than ever before. That meant more than anything. One afternoon, she came over with a basket of lemons from her backyard. "Let's make pie," she said, smiling. It had been years since we baked together. The smell of butter and sugar filled the kitchen as she rolled the dough. I watched her hands, steady, confident, so much like mine when I was her age. She looked up at me. "Do you miss him?" she asked gently. I paused. The knife in my hand hovered above a lemon. I thought about all the years, all the lies, the nights I cried quietly so she wouldn't hear. Then I exhaled. "I miss who I thought he was," I said. She nodded slowly. That was enough. That evening, we ate warm lemon pie on the porch. The sky was soft pink, the air smelled like sugar and rain. My daughter leaned her head on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Mom," she whispered. I smiled, a tear sliding down my cheek. I finally did something for me. The days turned into weeks. The legal papers were finalized. My name was free again. I sold the big house, too many memories in those walls, and moved into a smaller cottage near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, Just enough. My new home has a small garden, a white fence, and a kitchen window that catches the morning sun. Every morning I open that window, let the light in, and breathe. The smell of soil and tea leaves fills the room. It's become my new kind of prayer. One day, while organizing boxes, I found the old photograph, the one of him and that woman in front of the house. My heart skipped. For a second, I almost tore it, but instead, I placed it in a wooden box, closed the lid, and whispered, "You no longer have power here." I put it on a high shelf and walked away. Some memories you don't destroy, you just store them far enough away that they stop reaching you. My nights became peaceful. I started reading again, novels, letters, even old recipe books my mother left me. Sometimes I'd pause mid-page, thinking how much time I'd wasted waiting for someone else's approval. The world outside my window didn't change, but I had. The air felt different when you breathe without fear. People often think revenge is loud, that it's shouting, slamming doors, winning arguments. But the real revenge, the quiet kind, is peace. Sleeping through the night, smiling at yourself in the mirror, paying your bills with your own money, knowing no one owns your happiness anymore. That's justice. Not the courtroom kind, the soul kind. One rainy evening, I walked into town with my umbrella. The bakery smelled of cinnamon and bread. The shopkeeper, an old friend, smiled and said, "Haven't seen you this happy in years." I laughed softly. I haven't been this happy in years. When I stepped back into the rain, the drops hit my umbrella in a gentle rhythm. I stopped and listened. That sound, soft, steady, alive, felt like forgiveness. Not for him. For me. Sometimes I still think of the engagement party. The room full of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the moment everything shattered. It used to haunt me. Now I see it differently. That night wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the truth. Painful, yes, but freeing. Every life has a moment like that, when the mask cracks and the real face of life looks back at you. You can either run or face it. I faced mine, and I survived. A few months later, I attended my daughter's wedding. A smaller, quieter one this time. No grand speeches, no heavy secrets. Just love. Real love. When she walked down the aisle, she glanced at me, eyes shining, smile trembling. I nodded, whispering, "You're safe now." I sat there, holding a small handkerchief embroidered with my initials, and for the first time in decades, I cried tears of pure joy. When she danced with her husband, the lights flickered softly. I closed my eyes and remembered the girl she used to be, innocent, hopeful, asking me if true love existed. Back then, I didn't know how to answer. Now I do. True love isn't about forever. It's about honesty. It's about choosing peace over pride, truth over comfort. That's what I wish someone had told me long ago. Now, at night, when I sit by the window with a cup of tea, I sometimes see my reflection in the glass. Older, softer, but not broken. I smile at her, the woman who endured, who chose truth, who found peace. Sometimes I even whisper, "You did well." Because healing, my dear, isn't a straight line. It's a circle. You come back to yourself eventually. And still some habits linger. Sometimes I still set 2 cups on the table, then I remember I only need one. I smile every time. That's how I know I've made peace with my past. Not by forgetting it, but by no longer letting it define my future. The smell of lemon pie, the sound of rain, the warmth of tea, those have become my symbols of freedom. Whenever it rains, I open the window just a little, close my eyes, and let the scent of wet earth fill the room. It reminds me that even storms can be cleansing, that even endings can be gentle. Life didn't give me the ending I expected, but it gave me something far more precious, self-respect. And that, my dear, is worth more than any fairy tale love story. Did you feel her pain? Tell me what city you're listening from. I love reading your stories. If this touched your heart, subscribe and stay with me for more true feeling life journeys.